I was standing in my kitchen, wiping down the counter after breakfast, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my son, Michael. I remember thinking how nice it was that he was reaching out. We'd been planning this family trip to Hawaii for months. My heart sank as I read his message. Mum, about the Hawaii trip. Sarah and I talked it over. We'll just get you a cheap seat in the back. You don't really need to sit with us anyway, right? The kids want to sit together as a family. I read it 3 times. Then I set my phone down and walked to my living room window. I stood there for 20 minutes, just staring at the oak tree in my front yard, the same tree I'd planted when Michael was 7 years old. That text wasn't just about airplane seats. It was about where I fit in his life now, and apparently, that place was in the back, out of sight, out of mind. I picked up my phone and typed back, "Of course, dear. Whatever works best for the family." But inside, something had shifted. After 35 years of putting my son first, of being the mother who never said no, who always made everything work for everyone else, I was done being treated like an afterthought. The Hawaii trip was supposed to be my treat. I'd been saving for 2 years to take my son, his wife Sarah, and their 2 children on what I called our dream family vacation. I'd already put down deposits on a beautiful oceanfront rental, planned activities for the kids, researched the best restaurants. And now, apparently, I was getting the privilege of funding my own exclusion. That afternoon, I called the airline. "I'd like to make some changes to my reservation," I told the customer service representative. "I want to upgrade to first class, and I need to cancel one of the tickets I purchased." When she asked which ticket to cancel, I didn't hesitate. "Michael Harrison. He won't be needing his seat anymore." To understand why that text hit me so hard, you need to know about the last 5 years of my life. My husband Robert died when I was 58. We'd been married for 32 years, and suddenly I was alone for the first time since I was 25. Robert had been my partner in everything, especially when it came to dealing with Michael and his increasingly demanding wife. Michael had always been my baby. He was our only child, born after years of trying and one miscarriage that nearly broke me. Robert used to joke that I spoiled Michael rotten, and he wasn't wrong. When Michael wanted piano lessons, I drove him 40 minutes each way twice a week. When he decided he wanted to play hockey instead, I bought all the equipment and spent my Saturdays in freezing rinks. When he struggled in college, I paid for tutors. When he wanted to start his own business, I co-signed a loan I couldn't really afford. After Robert died, Michael became even more central to my world. He was all the family I had left, and I threw myself into being the perfect mother and grandmother. When Sarah gave birth to their first child, Emma, I was there every day for 2 weeks, cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, whatever they needed. When their son Jack was born 3 years later, I did it all over again. But somewhere along the way, my helpfulness became expected rather than appreciated. Sarah began treating me less like family and more like free help. She'd call me to babysit with just a few hours' notice, then act annoyed if I had other plans. She'd make comments about how I didn't understand modern parenting when I'd suggest the kids might need more structure. And Michael, instead of defending me or setting boundaries, would just say, "Mum, you know how Sarah is. Just let it go." The turning point came last Christmas. I'd spent weeks planning, shopping, decorating my house for what I hoped would be a magical family celebration. I bought thoughtful gifts for everyone, including expensive art supplies Sarah had mentioned wanting and the latest gaming system for the kids. Sarah showed up 2 hours late because she'd decided to stop by her sister's house first. When I served dinner, she complained that the turkey was too dry and asked if I'd remembered she was trying to eat clean now. The kids were on their devices the entire time, barely acknowledging the meal or the gifts. But the real blow came when I overheard Sarah on the phone with her mother later that evening. She was in my guest bathroom, but the door was thin, and she wasn't keeping her voice down. "It was fine, I guess," she was saying. "You know how Martha is. She tries too hard. The food was mediocre, and she went overboard with the gifts again. I think she's getting desperate for attention since Robert died. It's actually kind of sad." I stood in my hallway, holding the dessert plates I'd been taking to the kitchen, and felt something inside me crack. This was what my love and effort had earned me: pity and condescension from a woman I'd welcomed into my family, supported through difficult times, and treated like a daughter. After they left that night, I sat in my living room surrounded by torn wrapping paper and dirty dishes, and I made myself a promise. I wouldn't stop loving my son or my grandchildren, but I would stop allowing myself to be taken for granted. I would stop being the family doormat. That's why the text about the airplane seats hit me so hard. It wasn't just about where I'd sit on a plane. It was about Michael and Sarah deciding, once again, that my comfort and dignity mattered less than their convenience. And this time, I was paying for the privilege of being dismissed. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I made myself coffee, sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, and began making plans. First, I logged into my airline account and confirmed the changes I'd made the day before. My seat was now 2A, first class, window seat. Michael's ticket was officially cancelled, with a credit applied to my account. Then I called the vacation rental company. "I'd like to make some changes to my reservation," I told them. "I'll need to reduce the number of guests." I switched from the 4-bedroom house I'd booked to a beautiful 2-bedroom cottage just for me and my grandchildren. The difference in cost was substantial. Money I could now spend on activities and experiences for Emma and Jack without having to worry about what Sarah would approve of. Next, I called my travel insurance company and added coverage for just 3 travelers instead of 5. I even changed our dinner reservations from parties of 5 to parties of 3. Every single detail that I'd carefully arranged with Michael and Sarah in mind, I methodically undid. By noon, I was ready to make the call I'd been both dreading and anticipating. Michael answered on the second ring. "Hey, Mum. Sarah wanted me to ask about the hotel arrangements in Hawaii. She's hoping we can get connecting rooms since the kids can be loud in the mornings." "Actually, Michael," I said, keeping my voice level, "there's been a change of plans. I've cancelled your ticket and Sarah's ticket. The trip will just be me and the children." The silence on the other end lasted so long, I thought the call had dropped. Finally, he spoke. "What do you mean you cancelled our tickets? Mum, you can't just—" "I can, actually, since I'm the one paying for everything." I'd rehearsed this conversation in my mind, and I was determined to stay calm. "You made it clear that you'd prefer to keep your distance from me during the trip, so I thought it would be easier if you and Sarah stayed home. The children and I will have a wonderful time together." "But, Mom, that's not what I meant about the seats. We just thought—" "You thought I should sit in the back, away from my family, on a trip I'm paying for. You thought my comfort mattered less than your convenience. And you were wrong." Sarah's voice came through in the background, and I could hear her asking Michael what was happening. He covered the phone, but I could still make out their muffled conversation. When he came back on the line, his tone had changed completely. "Mum, you're being unreasonable. Sarah's really upset. She's been looking forward to this trip. We both have. The kids have been talking about it for months. The children are still going. In fact, they'll probably enjoy it more without Sarah criticizing everything I do and you apologizing for me every 5 minutes." "That's not fair. We don't—" "Michael." I cut him off. "I'm 63 years old. I've spent the last 5 years trying to fit myself into whatever shape would make you and Sarah happy. I've accepted disrespect, dismissal, and outright rudeness because I was afraid of losing you. But you know what? If treating me with basic courtesy is too much to ask, then maybe I've already lost you anyway. I could hear Sarah in the background getting louder, and Michael was clearly struggling to manage both conversations. Look, Mom, maybe we can work something out. Maybe we can change the seats. The seats were never the real problem, and you know it. The problem is that you've allowed your wife to treat me like hired help, and you've joined her. The problem is that you think my feelings are negotiable. Sarah wants to talk to you. I don't want to talk to Sarah. I want you to explain to your children why Mommy and Daddy won't be coming to Hawaii, and I want you to think about whether this is really the relationship you want with your mother. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, not from fear or sadness, but from adrenaline. I'd never spoken to Michael like that before. I'd never set a boundary that firm, and it felt both terrifying and liberating. 20 minutes later, my phone started ringing. It was Michael again, then Sarah, then Michael again. I let them all go to voicemail. Finally, a text came through from Sarah. Martha, this is ridiculous. You're punishing the children because you're upset with us. That's not fair to Emma and Jack. I texted back. The children are not being punished. They're still going on the trip. You and Michael are the ones choosing not to come. And if you're truly worried about fairness to Emma and Jack, you might consider how fair it is to teach them that it's okay to treat their grandmother with disrespect. The phone calls continued throughout the afternoon. I turned off my ringer and went to work on the final details of my trip. I researched kid-friendly activities, made reservations at restaurants with children's menus, and even booked a sunset catamaran cruise that I knew Emma and Jack would love. For the first time in months, I was actually excited about the vacation. That evening, Michael showed up at my door. I saw him through the window, sitting in his car for several minutes before finally getting out and walking up my front steps. When I opened the door, he looked exhausted. Mum, can we talk? Really talk? I let him in, and we sat in my living room, the same room where I'd realized how badly I'd been treated at Christmas. Sarah's crying, he said. She says you hate her. I don't hate Sarah, but I don't like the way she treats me, and I don't like the way you let her treat me. She doesn't mean to hurt your feelings. She has strong opinions about things. Michael, she called me desperate and sad to her mother, in my own house on Christmas Day, after I'd spent weeks making everything perfect for her family. And when I told you about it, you said I should let it go. He looked genuinely surprised. I didn't know she said that. There are a lot of things you don't know because you don't want to see them. You want to keep everyone happy, so you pretend the problems don't exist. But they do exist, and they're getting worse. We talked for almost 2 hours. Michael tried to negotiate, to find compromises, to convince me to reconsider my decision about Hawaii, but I held firm. This trip is happening exactly as I've planned it. The children and I are going, and we're going to have a wonderful time. If you and Sarah want to rebuild your relationship with me, that conversation can happen when I get back. As he was leaving, he turned to me with tears in his eyes. Mum, I never wanted things to be like this. Neither did I told him. But this is where your choices have led us. After Michael left that night, I sat down and wrote letters to Emma and Jack. They were 8 and 5 years old enough to understand that Mommy and Daddy wouldn't be coming on the trip, but too young to understand all the adult complications behind that decision. I wanted them to hear the truth from me before Sarah and Michael could spin it into a story about Grandma being mean or unreasonable. Dear Emma, I wrote in my carefully printed handwriting. I know Mommy and Daddy told you they can't come to Hawaii with us. I want you to know that this doesn't change anything about our special trip together. You and Jack and I are going to have the most wonderful adventure. We're going to swim with fish, build sandcastles, and eat ice cream for breakfast if we want to. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, but that doesn't mean anyone loves you any less. Grandma loves you more than all the stars in the sky. I wrote a similar letter to Jack, with simpler words and a drawing of an airplane. Then I put both letters in envelopes with their names on them, planning to give them to the children when I picked them up for the trip. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. I bought new clothes for Emma and Jack, picked up travel games and activities to keep them occupied on the flight, and even purchased a waterproof camera so they could take their own pictures of the fish when we went snorkeling. Every purchase, every plan, every moment of anticipation was focused entirely on making this the best possible experience for my grandchildren. Michael called twice more, and Sarah sent several long text messages that ranged from angry to pleading to accusatory. I responded to none of them. I'd said everything I needed to say, and now it was time for action, not more words. 3 days before we were scheduled to leave, Sarah showed up at my house. I was in my garden, deadheading my roses, when I heard the car door slam. She marched across my lawn like she was heading into battle. Martha, this has gone far enough. You're being selfish and vindictive, and you're hurting the children. I stood up slowly, brushing the dirt off my gardening gloves. The only people hurting the children are their parents, who are choosing to miss this trip instead of treating their grandmother with respect. We've always treated you with respect. I actually laughed. Sarah, you've spent 5 years treating me like inconvenient help. You've criticized my cooking, my parenting advice, my gifts, and my home. You've made it clear that I'm tolerated, not welcomed. And when I finally stood up for myself, you called me selfish. That's not... I never meant... She was struggling now, probably realizing that her usual tactics weren't going to work. What did you tell Emma and Jack about why you're not coming? We told them that Grandma was being stubborn and that we had to stay home because you wouldn't let us come. I felt a flash of genuine anger. So you lied to them. You made me the villain instead of taking responsibility for your own choices. We didn't lie. You literally cancelled our tickets. After you made it clear that sitting near me was beneath you, after you spent years making me feel unwelcome in my own son's life, I cancelled your tickets because you obviously didn't want to spend time with me anyway. Sarah tried several more approaches: tears, anger, bargaining, even threats about keeping the children away from me permanently. But I'd made my peace with my decision. The conversation ended with her storming back to her car, yelling that I was destroying this family. I went back to my roses. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was pruning dead blooms to make room for new growth. The day before our departure, Michael brought Emma and Jack over to spend the night. This was part of our original plan. The children would sleep at Grandma's house, and we'd all leave for the airport together in the morning. Michael looked haggard when he dropped them off. Mum, I still think we can work this out. Sarah's willing to apologize if you'll reconsider. Michael, Sarah had 5 years to apologize for the way she's treated me. She's only willing to do it now because there are consequences she doesn't like. That's not the same thing as actually being sorry. Emma ran up and threw her arms around my waist. Grandma, are we really going to see dolphins? We're going to try, sweetheart, and we're going to have so much fun, just the 3 of us. That evening, as I helped the children pack their carry-on bags and showed them pictures of where we'd be staying, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: pure, uncomplicated joy. No one was criticizing my choices or rolling their eyes at my enthusiasm. Emma and Jack were just excited to be with me, and I was excited to be with them. We made cookies for the plane, chose books to read together, and talked about all the things we wanted to do. For the first time since planning this trip, I wasn't worried about whether Sarah would approve of our activities or whether Michael would feel caught in the middle. I was just grandma, planning an adventure with her grandchildren. That night, after Emma and Jack were asleep in the guest room, I sat on my front porch with a cup of tea and thought about the path that had led me here 6 months ago. I would never have imagined taking such a dramatic stand. I would have accepted the seats in the back of the plane, smiled through Sarah's complaints about the vacation, and convinced myself that keeping the peace was worth my own diminished dignity. But losing Robert had taught me something important about time and priorities. Life is precious and unpredictable, and I wasn't going to waste any more of it pretending that mistreatment was acceptable just to avoid conflict. My grandchildren deserved to see their grandmother standing up for herself, setting boundaries, and refusing to accept less than she deserved. Tomorrow, Emma and Jack and I would board that plane, me in first class, them in the seats right behind me that I'd specially requested. We'd fly to Hawaii as a team, and we'd create memories that had nothing to do with adult drama and everything to do with love, adventure, and mutual respect. For the first time in years, I fell asleep excited about tomorrow instead of anxious about what might go wrong. The flight to Hawaii was magical. Emma pressed her face to the window during takeoff, pointing out cars that looked like toys and clouds that looked like animals. Jack fell asleep with his head on my shoulder before we'd even reached cruising altitude. The first-class flight attendant, a lovely woman named Patricia, made a point of checking on the children throughout the flight, bringing them extra cookies and coloring books. "Traveling alone with your grandchildren?" she asked during drink service. "It's our first big adventure together," I told her. "Their parents couldn't make it." She smiled knowingly. "Well, they're lucky to have such a devoted grandmother." When we landed in Honolulu, the children's excitement was infectious. They chattered constantly during the drive to our cottage, pointing out palm trees and asking 100 questions about when we could go to the beach. Our rental was perfect. A cozy 2-bedroom place just steps from a protected lagoon where the children could swim safely. That first afternoon, while Emma and Jack napped off their jet lag, I received a series of texts from Michael. "How was the flight? Are the kids okay? Sarah wants to know if Jack remembered to bring his inhaler." I texted back photos. The children at the airport, Emma waving from her airplane seat, both kids asleep in the cottage with the ocean visible through the window. "Everyone's safe and happy," I wrote. "Jack has his inhaler. We're having a wonderful time." Michael's response came quickly. "Good. Sarah's really struggling with this, Mum. She keeps saying she should be there with them." I didn't reply. Sarah had made her choice when she allowed her husband to suggest putting me in the back of the plane. If she was struggling now, that was a consequence she'd brought on herself. The next 5 days were everything I'd hoped they would be and more. Emma and Jack and I fell into an easy rhythm. We woke up early and walked on the beach before the crowds arrived. We ate breakfast at a little cafe where the owner, a grandmother herself, treated us like family. We spent mornings swimming and building sandcastles, afternoons exploring tide pools and reading books in the shade, and evenings watching sunset and planning the next day's adventures. On our second day, we went snorkeling. I'd been nervous about taking the children into the water, but our guide was patient and experienced with kids. Emma shrieked with delight when she saw her first tropical fish. Jack was initially scared, but after watching his sister's enthusiasm, he wanted to try too. By the end of the day, they were both confident in the water, and I had dozens of photos of them pointing excitedly at colourful fish. "Grandma," Emma said that evening as we shared shaved ice on the beach, This is the best vacation ever. Even without Mommy and Daddy? I asked. She considered this seriously. I miss them, but it's special with just us. You let us do more fun stuff. Jack nodded agreement. Mommy would say the fish are too scary and the ice is too messy. Out of the mouths of babes. My 5-year-old grandson had perfectly captured what I'd been struggling to articulate. Sarah's tendency to focus on problems instead of possibilities, to see danger instead of adventure. Every evening, I called Michael to let him talk to the children. Emma and Jack would chatter excitedly about their day, describing every fish they'd seen, every shell they'd found, every new food they'd tried. Michael would put the phone on speaker so Sarah could listen too, and I could hear the tension in both their voices as they realized how much fun their children were having without them. On our 4th day, we took a catamaran cruise. Emma and Jack had never been on a sailboat before, and they were fascinated by everything. The way the sails caught the wind, the dolphins that followed our wake, the way the water changed color as we moved further from shore. The crew treated them like little pirates, teaching them sailing terms and letting them help with simple tasks. During lunch on the boat, Emma asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Grandma, why didn't Mommy and Daddy come with us?" I'd been dreading this conversation, but I'd also been preparing for it. Sometimes grown-ups disagree about things, and it takes time to work out the problems. Your Mommy and Daddy and I had a disagreement, and we decided it would be better if they stayed home this time. Are you mad at them? I'm not mad, sweetheart. I'm sad that they're missing all this fun with us. But I'm also really happy that you and Jack and I get to have this special time together. Will they come next time? I hope so. That depends on whether we can solve our grown-up problems. Jack, who had been listening while pretending to focus on his sandwich, piped up. I think they should say sorry to you, Grandma. That's what I have to do when I'm mean to Emma. Again, the wisdom of children. My grandson understood something that his parents seemed to struggle with, that hurtful behavior requires genuine apology and changed actions, not just explanations and excuses. That evening, instead of the usual brief check-in call, Michael asked if he could video chat with all of us. Emma and Jack showed him their seashell collection, their new t-shirts, and the drawings they'd made of the fish we'd seen. They were tan and relaxed and radiantly happy. After the children went to bed, Michael called back. Mum, they look amazing. They're having such a good time. They are. We all are. I keep thinking about what Jack said about us saying sorry to you. Maybe he's right. Maybe he is. There was a long pause. Sarah wants to talk to you. Before I could object, Sarah's face appeared on the screen. She looked like she'd been crying. Martha, I owe you an apology. A real one, not just because I want to fix this situation. I'm listening. I've been thinking about the things you said, about how I've treated you. And you're right. I have been disrespectful. I've taken your help for granted, criticized things that weren't my business to criticize, and made you feel unwelcome. I told myself I was just being honest, or looking out for my family. But really, I was being cruel. She took a shaky breath. I think I was jealous of how much the kids love you, and instead of appreciating that they have such a wonderful grandmother, I tried to find flaws in everything you did. That was wrong, and I'm sorry. It was the most honest conversation Sarah and I had ever had. We talked for almost an hour, about boundaries, about respect, about what we both wanted for Emma and Jack, about how we could build a better relationship going forward. It wasn't a magic fix, but it was a genuine beginning. On our last morning in Hawaii, Emma and Jack and I sat on the beach watching the sunrise. They'd become early risers during our trip, excited to start each new day of adventure. Jack was building a sandcastle while Emma collected shells to decorate it. I don't want to go home, Emma said, echoing my own thoughts. I know, sweetheart, but we have such good memories to take with us, and now we know we can have wonderful adventures together. Can we come back someday? Just us. I hope so. As we packed that morning, I reflected on how much had changed in just 1 week. The children were more confident, more independent. They'd tried new foods, conquered fears, and discovered they were braver and more capable than they'd known. And I had rediscovered something I'd almost forgotten, that I was a good grandmother, not despite setting boundaries, but because I'd finally started setting them. The flight home was bittersweet. Emma and Jack chatted excitedly about showing their parents all their treasures: shells, photos, souvenirs, and stories. But I could see them processing the fact that our special time together was ending. Michael and Sarah were waiting for us at the airport. Sarah looked nervous, uncertain about how I'd receive her after our conversation. But when Emma and Jack ran to hug their parents, and then immediately started pulling them toward me, saying, "Come see what Grandma helped us find," Zrenia, I knew we were going to be okay. The drive home was filled with the children's non-stop chatter about their adventures. Sarah asked genuine questions, expressing amazement at their bravery in trying new things and admiration for how well they'd handled the long flights. When Jack mentioned that he'd been scared of snorkeling at first, but Grandma had helped him be brave, Sarah caught my eye in the rearview mirror and smiled. "It sounds like Grandma was the perfect travel companion," she said. Over the following weeks, our family dynamic began to shift in subtle but meaningful ways. Sarah started asking for my opinion instead of dismissing it. Michael stopped automatically taking his wife's side in every disagreement. The children talked constantly about our trip, but more importantly, they seemed to see me differently, not just as the grandmother who spoiled them, but as someone who could be trusted with real adventures. 3 months later, Sarah called me with an unexpected request. "Martha, I know this is short notice, but Emma has a school project about family traditions, and she wants to interview you about your childhood. Would you have time to help her with it?" It was a small thing, but it represented something huge. Sarah actively facilitating a relationship between me and Emma instead of controlling or limiting it. When I went over to help with the project, Sarah made my favorite tea and sat with us, asking her own questions about stories I'd never thought to share before. During the holidays that year, things were dramatically different. Sarah asked if she could help with dinner instead of criticizing the menu. Michael defended me when his mother-in-law made a snide comment about older people not understanding modern children. Emma and Jack, emboldened by our Hawaiian adventure, asked if we could start a new tradition of Grandma taking them on a special trip every year. "That sounds like a wonderful tradition," I told them, catching Sarah's eye as she nodded in agreement. 6 months after Hawaii, I planned a weekend camping trip. Just Emma, Jack, and me. Sarah helped them pack, reminding them to listen to Grandma and be grateful for the experience. When we returned, muddy and tired and full of stories about hiking and s'mores and sleeping in a tent, Michael hugged me tight and said, "Thank you, Mum. Thank you for showing them that they're braver than they think." But perhaps the most meaningful change came a year later, when we were planning our second annual grandmother-grandchildren adventure. We were discussing destinations over dinner when Sarah spoke up. "You know, Martha, if you wouldn't mind the company, Michael and I would love to come along this time. We promise to follow your lead and not interfere with your special relationship with the kids." I looked at her for a long moment, remembering the woman who had once suggested I sit in the back of the plane, away from my family. This Sarah, the one who was acknowledging my leadership role and asking permission to join rather than assuming control, was someone I could travel with. "I think that would be wonderful," I said. "But I keep my first-class seat." Sarah laughed, genuinely laughed, and said, "I wouldn't dream of suggesting otherwise." As I write this, 2 years have passed since that text message that changed everything. Emma is 10 now, Jack is 7, and they still talk about that first Hawaiian adventure as one of their favourite memories. They've learned that their grandmother is someone who keeps her word, stands up for herself, and isn't afraid to take charge when necessary. Sarah and I will never be best friends, but we've found a way to respect each other and work together for the good of our family. She's learned to appreciate my strengths instead of focusing on what she sees as my weaknesses. And I've learned to give her the benefit of the doubt instead of assuming the worst of her motivations. Michael has grown into a stronger man, one who doesn't avoid conflict by asking his mother to let things go, but instead addresses problems directly and honestly. Our relationship is deeper now, built on mutual respect rather than his guilt and my desperate need to please. But the most important change is in me. I learned that love doesn't require accepting disrespect, and that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. I learned that my comfort, my dignity, and my feelings matter as much as anyone else's. And I learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people you love is to stop enabling their bad behavior. That text message about sitting in the back of the plane was meant to put me in my place. Instead, it helped me find my place. As a woman who values herself enough to demand better treatment, as a grandmother who models self-respect for her grandchildren, and as a mother who loves her son enough to help him become a better man. I kept that first-class seat, and I kept my dignity. And in the end, that's what allowed me to keep my family too.